A billionaire handed a homeless single mother his unlimited credit card and simply walked away. Less than 1 hour later, a transaction alert pinged on his phone. It wasn't for food. It wasn't for clothes. It definitely wasn't a booking for a 5-star hotel. It was something he couldn't possibly ignore. Instantly, he knew there would be consequences. Because in that single moment, she made a decision that would rewrite her entire future and expose a truth that neither of them was ready to face. 37-year-old Brennan Ashford had stopped believing in human goodness a long time ago. As the CEO of Ashford Global Industries, a pharmaceutical empire worth over $11 billion, he'd seen people lie, manipulate, and betray each other for far less than pocket change. His penthouse suite overlooked the Boston Harbor, with windows stretching 12 feet high and art worth millions hanging on walls that echoed with an expensive emptiness. He owned vacation homes in 3 different countries. His watch cost more than most people earned in an entire year. And yet, every single morning, he woke up feeling like a man drowning in shallow water. His late father, Montgomery Ashford, had drilled one lesson into him since childhood. Trust is a currency fools spend freely. Son, he'd say. The poor are especially dangerous. Give them an inch. They'll take everything and still demand more. They can't help themselves. Desperation makes thieves of everyone. For 37 years, Brennan had carried that gospel like scripture. Every charitable donation he made was filtered through a team of lawyers and accountants. Every act of giving was precisely calculated for tax benefits and public image. He had never once looked poverty in the face and simply helped. Not without conditions, not without control, and certainly not without protecting himself first. But that particular January morning, something cracked in the ice around his chest. He was late for an emergency board meeting, rushing through Back Bay Station with his assistant trailing 3 steps behind him. His Italian wool coat cost $8,000. The leather briefcase in his hand held contracts worth $40 million. His phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from investors, lawyers, and executives, all demanding a piece of his attention. And then, he saw her. Huddled against the cold tile wall, near the Orange Line entrance, sat a woman, maybe in her early 30s, with exhaustion carved into every line of her face. A little girl no older than 6 slept curled in her lap, wrapped in a donated coat that was 2 sizes too large. The woman's arms were locked around the child like a fortress made of flesh and bone and desperate, unconditional love. A piece of cardboard rested beside them, with black marker scrawled in shaky letters. Single mother lost Orome. Anything helps. God bless you. Brennan stopped walking. His assistant nearly crashed right into him. Mr. Ashford, the board is waiting. We have exactly 9 minutes to wait here, Brennan said, his voice distant, completely disconnected from the urgency buzzing all around him. He approached the woman slowly, his expensive shoes clicking against the subway tile. He was unsure why his body was moving when every logical part of his brain screamed at him to keep walking. Homeless people were everywhere in Boston. This wasn't special. This wasn't different. This was just another casualty of a system that, in many ways, he'd helped build. Except, something about her stopped him cold. When the woman looked up, there was no performance in her eyes. There was no rehearsed desperation or a practiced plea for sympathy. There was just a bone-deep exhaustion, the kind that settles into your marrow after months of carrying a weight no single person should ever have to bear. Her lips were chapped from the winter wind. Her fingernails were clean but ragged. She had clearly given up on vanity, but she hadn't given up on her dignity. "I'm sorry," she said immediately, her voice rough from the cold and disuse. "We're not bothering anyone. We can move if we need to." Her apology for simply existing hit Brennan harder than any business loss he'd ever experienced. "What's your name?" he asked, kneeling down despite the silent protests of his expensive pants touching the filthy subway floor. She blinked, surprised that kindness could wear a suit that expensive. "Sutton," she said quietly. "Sutton Reeves. And your daughter." The woman's arms instinctively tightened around the sleeping child. Protective. Primal. Her name is Indy. She just turned 6 last week. Brennan studied Sutton's face. He could see intelligence living behind that exhaustion. He could hear education in the careful way she spoke. This wasn't someone who was born into poverty. This was someone who had fallen from somewhere higher and just couldn't find her footing on the way down. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. Shame flickered across Sutton's features, like a match being struck in the darkness. 5 months, we were staying with my sister until November, but she lost her apartment too. We've been rotating between here and the shelter on Mass Avenue when they have space. 5 months. A 6-year-old child sleeping on subway floors for 5 months while thousands of people walked past them every single day. Behind him, his assistant cleared her throat impatiently. "Mr. Ashford, we really must." Brennan raised one hand, silencing her without breaking eye contact with Sutton. His father's voice echoed in his skull. "The desperate will bleed you dry and smile while doing it." Maybe it was time to test that theory himself. Maybe it was time to prove, once and for all, whether his father had been right, or whether Brennan had spent 37 years believing a lie that protected his wallet but poisoned his soul. Brennan reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Sutton's eyes widened slightly, probably expecting a few bills if she was lucky. Maybe $20, maybe $50 if the universe was feeling particularly generous that day. Instead, Brennan pulled out a sleek, black credit card. Platinum edges, raised numbers. No spending limit. No restrictions. Just pure, unrestricted access to a level of wealth that most people couldn't even comprehend in their wildest dreams. Sutton just stared at it, like he had just pulled out a weapon. "Take it," Brennan said, holding the card between them like a bridge between two different worlds. "I don't understand," Sutton stammered, pulling Indy closer as if the card itself might hurt them. "It's yours for 24 hours, Brennan explained, his voice steady despite the chaos of doubt screaming inside his head. "Buy whatever you want. No limits. No questions. No conditions." Sutton's hands began to tremble. "Sir, this has to be some kind of trick. People don't just hand out credit cards to strangers. Especially not to people like me." "I want to see something," Brennan said. And for the first time in years, he spoke complete truth. "I want to see what someone with nothing does. When given everything, I want to test something my father taught me. Prove him right or prove him wrong." He pressed the card into her palm. Her fingers were ice cold, rough from exposure, shaking like leaves in a storm. "Why me?" Sutton whispered, tears pooling in eyes that had cried themselves empty months ago. Brennan looked at Indy, sleeping peacefully despite the cold, despite the noise, despite the absolute instability of her entire world. He thought about his own childhood, nannies and private schools and skiing in Switzerland. Every need met before he could even name it. This child had nothing except a mother who refused to let go. "Because I'm tired of assumptions," Brennan said quietly. "Because I want to believe there's still something good left in people who've lost everything. Prove my father right or prove him wrong. Either way, I'll finally know the truth." Sutton closed her fingers around the card slowly, like someone touching fire for the first time and expecting to be burned. 24 hours, Brennan repeated, standing up. His knees ached from kneeling on frozen tile. "Spend whatever you want. There's no pin. Just sign your name. I'll find you here tomorrow morning. Same time, same place." His assistant looked physically ill. "Mr. Ashford, this is highly irregular. We should at least establish parameters." "Legal protection, no parameters," Brennan said firmly, his eyes still locked on Sutton. "No protection. Just trust." The word felt foreign in his mouth. Trust. He'd spent decades avoiding it like a disease. Sutton opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She just clutched the card like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. Her entire body shaking with emotions Brennan couldn't begin to name as he walked away. His father's voice whispered warnings in his head. "She drained your account. She'll disappear into the night. You're a fool, Brennan, a sentimental, naive fool." But another voice, quieter, more fragile, whispered something different. "What if she doesn't?" Brennan didn't sleep that night. His penthouse felt cavernous and cold despite the heating system that cost more than a car. He stood at the window, staring at Boston's glittering skyline, wondering if somewhere down there, Sutton and Indy were finally warm for the first time in months. He pulled out his phone, opened his banking app. The credit card was linked to his personal account. He could track every transaction in real time, every purchase, every location, every choice she made. For hours, nothing. Midnight came and went. 1 a.m. 2. 3. Still nothing. Why wasn't she spending? Was she afraid? Did she think it was a trap? Or worse, was she planning something big, waiting for stores to open? Preparing to maximize every possible dollar. At 6:23 a.m., his phone buzzed. Transaction: $37.84. Location: 24-hour CVS. Downtown crossing. Brennan's pulse spiked. He clicked for details, but the app only showed the amount, not what was purchased. Just numbers. Then another notification. Transaction: $52.19. Location target: South Bay. Then another. $28.63. Dunkin' Donuts. His chest tightened, not with anger, but with something stranger. Anticipation. She was spending, yes, but carefully, modestly. These weren't the transactions of someone drunk on sudden wealth. These were the purchases of someone desperately practical. By 8:47 a.m., Brennan couldn't wait anymore. He called his driver. Cancel everything today, he told his assistant when she called, panicked about the missed board meeting. Mr. Ashford, you have 4 critical meetings, and the investors are furious. I don't care, Brennan said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. Cancel it, all reschedule, handle it. I don't care how. He dressed quickly, grabbed his coat, and had his driver take him to Back Bay Station. But 3 blocks away, he told the driver to stop. He needed to walk. Needed to feel the cold air. Needed to remember what the city actually felt like when you weren't insulated by wealth. When he reached the Orange Line entrance, Sutton was exactly where he'd left her, but everything else had changed. Indy was awake now, sitting beside her mother wearing a brand new purple winter coat with a fur-lined hood. Her hair had been brushed, pulled back with a small butterfly clip. She clutched a new stuffed elephant, hugging it like treasure while she colored in a fresh coloring book with crayons still smelling like the package. Sutton saw Brennan approaching and immediately stood up, the credit card already in her trembling hand. I was going to return it, she said quickly, panic edging her voice. I promise I was. I just needed to get a few things first. Basic things. Necessary things. Keep it, Brennan said gently, raising both hands. You still have hours left. Sutton's shoulders sagged with something between relief and confusion. I don't understand you. That makes 2 of us, Brennan admitted. He glanced at Indy, who's watching him with wide, curious brown eyes. You bought her a coat. She was freezing, Sutton said simply, as if that explained everything. And perhaps it did. Perhaps that was the only explanation that mattered. Brennan knelt down to Indy's level, careful not to startle her. That's a nice elephant. What's her name? Indy hugged the toy tighter, shy but smiling. Stella, she whispered. That's a beautiful name, Brennan said softly, his throat tight for reasons he couldn't explain. He looked up at Sutton. What else did you buy? Sutton hesitated, then slowly pulled 2 crumpled receipts from her pocket and handed them over like evidence in a trial she was certain to lose. Brennan scanned the first receipt. Children's winter coat, size 6. Children's boots, waterproof. Socks, 3-pack. Children's underwear, pack of 7 stuffed elephant toy. Coloring books, crayons, children's multivitamins, Band-Aids, Neosporin, children's cold medicine. His throat tightened. Every single item was for Indy, not one thing for herself. The second receipt was from a grocery store. Bread, peanut butter, granola bars, apples, juice boxers, crackers, string cheese, a gallon of milk. And at the bottom, something that made Brennan's breath catch. Women's Shelter Donation Fund, $100. If this moment is hitting you, subscribe for more stories like this. Now let's continue. He looked up sharply. You donated money. Sutton's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The shelter on Mass Avenue. They've helped us when they could. They're always full, always running out of supplies. I thought if I had extra, even just for one day, maybe I could help them help someone else. Someone else, Brennan repeated, his voice barely functional. You're homeless. You've been sleeping on subway floors for 5 months, and you gave money to help other people. There are women there with babies, Sutton said quietly. With teenagers. With disabilities. Some of them have it so much worse than we do. I know what it's like to need help and have nowhere to turn. If I could give back even a little, even for one day, I had to. Brennan stared at the receipts. His father's voice was completely silent now, obliterated by the truth printed on thermal paper. This woman, who had every reason to be selfish, who had every justification to think only of herself and her daughter, had spent a billionaire's money on necessities, medicine, and charity. Not liquor. Not designer clothes. Not jewelry or electronics or anything remotely self-indulgent. Just survival. Just kindness. Just love. You didn't buy anything for yourself? Brennan said, his voice strained. Not a single thing. Sutton shook her head. Indy comes first. She always comes first. I can manage. I've managed this long. But she deserves better. She deserves to be warm, to be safe, to be a child. Brennan looked at Indy, coloring a picture of a butterfly with fierce concentration. Stella the elephant tucked under her arm. A child who'd spent 6 years learning that the world was cold and unstable, but who still smiled, still colored, still opet. For the first time in his life, Brennan Ashford felt genuinely small note in wealth. Not in power, but in character and humanity. In basic human decency. This homeless single mother had more grace in her roughened fingertips than he decultivated in 37 years of privilege. Come with me, he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before his brain could catch up. Sutton blinked. What? Both of you, come with me. Please. Fear flickered in her eyes. Where? Somewhere warm, Brennan said, his voice breaking slightly. Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can finally stop running. Tears spilled down Sutton's cheeks. She looked at her daughter, then at the man kneeling before them, and for the first time in 5 months, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, not everyone in the world was cruel. Brennan took them to the Four Seasons first, not his penthouse that felt too invasive, too overwhelming. Instead, he booked a corner suite overlooking the public garden, with 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and windows that let in actual sunlight instead of fluorescent subway glare. Sutton stood in the doorway, frozen, unable to cross the threshold. It's okay, Brennan said gently. This is yours, for as long as you need it. No conditions, no expectations, just safety. Indy, unburdened by a dull disbelief, ran inside immediately, her new boots squeaking on polished hardwood. She touched everything with wonder. The velvet couch, the heavy curtains, the bowl of fresh fruit on the marble counter. Mama, look, Indy called, pointing at the bathroom. There's a bathtub, a really big one. Like in the movies? Sutton finally stepped inside, moving like someone walking through a dream that might shatter at any moment. She set down the plastic bag that held everything she owned, literally everything that remained of her previous life, and turned to Brennan with tears, streaming freely. I don't understand, she whispered, voice fracturing. Why are you doing this? What do you want from us? Brennan had been asked that question 1,000 times in business. People always wanted to know his angle, his strategy, his hidden agenda. But standing there, watching a mother see safety for the first time in months, he realized he didn't have an agenda. He just had a choice. You reminded me what money is actually for, he said quietly. I'd forgotten, or maybe I never knew. Sutton walked over to where Indy was pressing buttons on the TV remote, delighted by every channel that appeared. She knelt down and wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her like she'd been afraid to hold her too tightly before, as if hope itself might break. You need to rest, Brennan said, his voice thick. Order room service. Take a real bath. Sleep in an actual bed. I'll come back tomorrow morning. We'll figure out the next steps then. Next steps? Sutton asked, confusion and fear mixing in her expression. Housing, employment, school for Indy, healthcare, childcare, stability. Brennan listed them like a business plan because that's what his brain did. It solved problems systematically. None of this has to be temporary, unless you want it to be. Sutton stared at him like he'd just spoken a language she'd forgotten existed. You're serious? Completely. You're a stranger. We're nobody. We're just two people who got unlucky and couldn't climb back out. You, nobody, Brennan corrected gently. Now you're someone I care about. Now you matter. Now you have someone who won't let you fall again. Sutton opened her mouth to argue, to protest, to explain all the reasons this couldn't be real. But exhaustion won. 5 months of hypervigilance and fear and sleeping with one eye open came crashing down. She sank onto the couch, her body folding like someone who'd been holding up the sky and could finally let it rest on something stronger. Thank you, she whispered, and the words carried the weight of 5 months of suffering compressed into 2 syllables. Brennan nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Get some rest, Sutton. You're safe now. Both of you. As he left the suite, he heard Indy's delighted laughter echoing behind him. And Brennan Ashford realized he was smiling. Not the calculated, camera-ready smile he used in boardrooms, but something genuine, something human, something his face had almost forgotten how to do. That night, Brennan made phone calls. Not to lawyers or PR teams or financial advisors, but to people who actually help social workers, housing advocates, job placement specialists, education coordinators. He used his name not as a weapon, but as a key to open doors that had been slammed in Sutton's face for months. By morning, he had options. Real, tangible, sustainable options. He returned to the Four Seasons at 9 a.m., carrying coffee and a bag of fresh pastries from a bakery Indy would love. When Sutton opened the door, she looked transformed. Not in appearance. She still wore the same worn clothes, but in posture, in the way she stood straighter, in the way her eyes held something other than perpetual fear. Indy was drawing at the table, humming a song about butterflies. Stella sat proudly beside her, overseeing the artwork. Morning, Brennan said, handing Sutton the coffee. She took it with both hands, inhaling the steam like a memory she'd thought was lost forever. Real coffee. From an actual coffee shop. I forgot what that was like. They sat together while Indy colored, and Brennan laid out the plan. Sutton listened in stunned silence as Brennan laid out the plan. A 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood, near good schools. It would be subsidized at first, but with a clear path for her to take over the payments completely. There were job training programs, matched to her skills, and full healthcare coverage. Indy would be enrolled in 1st grade at a public school with excellent ratings, one that had a before and after care program. Tears ran down Sutton's face, dripping into the coffee that had long since grown cold while Brennan talked. This isn't charity, Brennan clarified, almost as if he was trying to convince himself as much as her. It's an investment. You're intelligent, capable, and resilient. You just need a foundation to rebuild from. A place to stand so you can start climbing again. I don't know how to repay you, Sutton said, her voice barely a whisper. You already did, Brennan replied softly. You showed me that goodness still exists in people, that desperation doesn't automatically create monsters. You showed me that my father was wrong about everything that actually matters. Sutton just shook her head, more tears falling. I just bought what Indy needed. Exactly, Brennan said. You had unlimited wealth for 24 hours, and you chose love over greed. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How many people would have drained that card buying things for themselves and walked away without looking back? Sutton's gaze drifted to her daughter, who was carefully coloring inside the lines of a flower, her small tongue poking out in concentration. She's all I have. She's all that matters. Everything I do, every choice I make, it's all for her. I know, Brennan said. I saw it in those receipts. I saw it in that donation you made to the shelter. You could have taken everything, but you gave anyway. That's not just good. That's extraordinary. 3 weeks later, Sutton and Indy moved into their new apartment. It was on the 3rd floor of a clean, quiet building with a small playground out back. It wasn't luxury laminate counters, build a great carpet, standard fixtures from a catalog, but it was theirs. It was real. Walls that didn't move. A door that locked from the inside. Heat that actually worked. Windows that let in sunlight without letting in the wind. Brennan helped them move in, carrying boxers up the stairs, and patiently assembling furniture from IKEA. He laughed when Indy insisted on supervising the process by placing a stuffed bear, Stella, on every flat surface and declaring it decorated. "She's very particular about interior design," Sutton joked, watching her daughter arrange a menagerie of stuffed animals with the seriousness of an architect. Brennan didn't mind at all. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt usaf, not powerful, not influential, not wealthy, just useful, just present, just human. That evening, after Indy had fallen asleep in a new bed, her very first real bed that was on a couch or the floor or a cot in a shelter, Sutton and Brennan stood in the small living room. The air between them was thick with a mixture of exhaustion and profound gratitude. "I start the workforce development program next Monday," Sutton said, breaking the silence. "Medical coding and billing. It's stable work, good benefits, a real career path. You're going to be incredible at it," Brennan said, and he meant every word. Sutton looked around the small apartment, her eyes glistening in the soft glow of the lamplight. "I keep waiting to wake up, to find myself back at the subway station, to realize this was all just some elaborate dream I had while freezing on the concrete." "It's real," Brennan assured her gently. "It's all yours. No one can take it away from you." She turned to face him, her voice breaking just a little around the edges. "Why did you choose us? Out of all the people you could have helped, out of everyone in this city who's struggling, why me and Indy?" Brennan had asked himself that same question every single day since that morning at the subway station. He'd tried to analyze it like a business decision, to break it down into logical components. But the truth was simpler and far more complicated than any logic. "Because you looked at your daughter the way my mother used to look at me," he said quietly, "before she died. Before my father turned cold and bitter and taught me that trust was a weakness." He looked at Indy like nothing else in the world existed, like you would burn down the entire universe just to keep her safe. "And in that moment, I realized I'd spent 37 years believing people like you didn't exist anymore." Sutton wiped her eyes. "You gave us a future." "No," Brennan corrected her. "You already had a future. I just helped you reach it a little sooner. You did all the hard work. You survived. You kept Indy safe. You stayed good when the world gave you every reason not to be. That's all you. I just moved some obstacles out of your way." Sutton managed to smile through her tears. "You're different than I expected. When I first saw you at the station, in your expensive coat with that fancy briefcase, I thought you'd be cold, cruel, maybe indifferent, at best." "I was all of those things," Brennan admitted. "You changed that, you and Indy. You reminded me that wealth is worthless if it doesn't multiply, meaning." They stood in a comfortable silence. The old apartment settled around them with the gentle creaks and hums that sounded like peace. Indy soft, even breathing drifted from the bedroom. The radiator clicked on, flooding the space with a comforting warmth. For the first time in 5 months, Sutton's shoulders were relaxed, and for the first time in 37 years, Brennan felt like his life had an actual, tangible purpose. Mont passé. Sutton completed her training program with honors and landed a great position at Boston Medical Center with full benefits and regular, predictable hours. Indy absolutely thrived in first grade. She made new friends, brought home artwork that Sutton proudly displayed on the fridge, and no longer carried the invisible weight of homelessness on her small shoulders. Brennan visited often, not as a benefactor checking on an investment, but as a friend. He was the friend who attended India's school talent show and clapped the loudest when she sang "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," completely off-key, but with unwavering confidence. He was the friend who helped Sutton figure out why the sink was leaking. He was the friend who just showed up on difficult days without needing to be asked. Through them, he learned things about himself. He'd never known that he actually liked cooking simple meals far more than eating at expensive restaurants. That the sound of a child's laughter was infinitely better than the sound of applause in a boardroom. That watching someone else rebuild their life from the ground up was more deeply satisfying than watching his stock portfolio grow. One evening, as they were all sitting on Sutton's modest couch, Indy was excitedly showing him her science project about the life cycle of butterflies. Sutton quietly handed him something. It was his credit card. "I kept it," she admitted, a slight blush rising on her cheeks. "I know I should have given it back weeks ago, but primera duase is scared. Scared that if I returned it, all of this would disappear, that it was only real as long as I held on to that little piece of plastic." Brennan just smiled and gently closed her fingers back around the card. "Keep it." "Brennan, I can't. Think of it as an emergency fund, aside simply for Indy, for unexpected expenses, for your peace of mind. You've more than proven what you do with it. You've proven that I can trust you more than I trust most people I've been known for decades." Sutton stared down at the card in her hand, then back up at him. "You really mean that?" "Completely." She wiped her eyes again, but this time she was laughing through her tears. "You are the strangest billionaire I've ever met."